Those are the Zelda games for the Nintendo 64. They're some of my favorite games, some of the best of all time, and kinda sorta got butchered when ported to the 3DS, so I'm gonna whine about these now.
Oh, God. Oh, I should have waited longer to start these.
So, good news. I spoke to my doctor and he said I came down from my Zelda height that I reached back in June, so let's get back up there with 2 more games.
What system is this? The DS2 was released in 2011, and I think it did really well.
I think that's what I said the last 10 times I talked about this system this hour.
I just can't get enough of talking about this little guy. I mean, a DS with a 3D display? Who wouldn't want that? Oh, well, the 3DS had a pretty solid library. Sure, there may have been a Metroid Prime Federation Force here, a Mario Party the Top 100 there, maybe some chibi Robo Ziplash as well, but hey, it's okay, because we got remasters of some of the greatest games of all time on this system.
And they f***ing stink.
Okay, so let's be fair here. I may shit on these guys every other day, but the moment you check my playtime on them,
I was kidding. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D. These are remasters of the 2 Zelda games from the Nintendo 64, and coincidentally my most played games on this system. These were how I played these games for the first time, and then after playing the Nintendo 64 versions? But why do I disregard these versions? Well, let's see by taking a deeper look at both of them. Now, you would think I'd start with Ocarina of Time since that was the first game released and first game chronologically, but I'm actually going to be contrarian today and look at the games in alphabetical order, but in reverse alphabetical order. So the first game we're going to be taking a look at, it's still Ocarina of Time.
In 1998, Ocarina of Time was released for the Nintendo 64 and was a revolutionary title. Bringing Zelda into the third dimension, it did to 3D adventure games what Super Mario 64 did to 3D platformers. And 25 years later, it still remains as one of the most beloved games of all time. One issue: it's on the Nintendo 64. This was the rough era of 3D games. They could play well, but asking them to look good too? That's a bit much, no need to get greedy. Anyways, 12 years later at E3 2010, Nintendo unveiled the 3DS, the successor to the uber popular DS, and after their press conference, Shigeru Miyamoto and Eiji Aonuma were at a special roundtable event where a demo of an Ocarina of Time remaster for the 3DS was shown. Miyamoto stated that when they started to work on the 3DS, he imagined how the 3D effect could truly bring you into the world of Ocarina of Time, make it truly feel like you were roaming the fields of Hyrule. At this point, it was still just a demo. However, a couple of months later, it was officially announced to be a full remaster in active development, being co-developed by Grezzo. And Grezzo absolutely knocked it out of the park, and Nintendo agreed as they went on to remaster Majora's Mask for the 3DS, and they also did the Link's Awakening remake and Miitopia for Switch.
Oh, and they did Triforce Heroes. Nobody's perfect.
The developers really did understand and respect Ocarina of Time's legacy. They left in various bugs that were alternate ways to solve puzzles because they wanted fans to play the way that they remembered. Game-breaking bugs were of course fixed, but the little things that were minor exploits, they kept them in because at the end of the day, this is meant to be the definitive form of Ocarina of Time, and to do that, they also included a reworked Master Quest from the GameCube release of Ocarina of Time. The game was released in June of 2011, and definitely one of the 3DS's first big titles. Sure, everyone was head over heels for LEGO Star Wars 3, but to have Ocarina of Time in June?
Oh my god! I can play a good game now?
The 3DS had a rough start with its games, just nothing all that great, but Ocarina of Time 3D was definitely a big one, bringing one of the most beloved games of all time back in its definitive form portably. This was a first for Nintendo.
And by first I mean second. Mario 64 DS is better than the original. I'm sorry.
This was one of the first games I got for my 2DS when I first got it. I sold a few games on eBay to get this 2DS and a copy of Majora's Mask. However, I went to vintage stock with my sister, and they had a copy of Ocarina of Time, and she offered to get it for me. This was my only game for the system until Majora's Mask arrived, and I played it to death until I got Majora's Mask, but I also went back to it and beat it after I beat Majora's Mask. But now, let's jump into the game itself. But first, this cover. I have never been a fan of how it looked. Don't get me wrong, it looks nice. It's gold as with Link on Epona and a little art of the instruments. At least the spine looks really nice. And man, it's crazy that a better version of Ocarina of Time is on a cart that is so small compared to the Nintendo 64 version. And starting up the game, I'm home.
It's a home I moved into when I was 15, but it's still a home regardless.
Immediately, the graphical enhancement is noticeable, which was of course the biggest focus. The biggest change was Link's character model, which is so much better. It was okay in the Nintendo 64 original, but here, it truly matches the vision the developers had for these characters. The hair, the hat, Link just looks less chunky. And same with adult Link. His improvement isn't as noticeable as young Link's, but I really like it because I feel like it captures his age better. While he's called adult Link, he is still clearly very young, which really works well in the story's favor. Other characters were not touched up as much, but they still look much better. Item models were also vastly improved, especially with the Master Sword. It actually looks like the Master Sword now. Textures seem to be at the same quality as in the Nintendo 64 originals. They look fine from a distance, but pretty pixelated up close. But hey, Link's model is debatably the most important improvement, as well, you can play as him. However, another huge improvement are some of the environments. The Nintendo 64 was not the strongest console.
What the hell do you mean? I have the expansion pack installed.
Not every interior could be fully modeled, so instead they did something very creative that was done in plenty of old films. You ever watch the original Star Wars trilogy and wonder, wow, how did they get those giant shots of the Death Star hangar? Well, here's the funny part. They didn't. They had the actors moving, but imposed a painting underneath to give the illusion of being a giant hangar. And that's kind of what they did in Ocarina of Time. Castle Town, the inside of Link's house, and most building interiors were just images to give the illusion that it's an actual modeled out place. And it looks fine on the Nintendo 64, but you play it on any following system and it's an ugly mess. But for 3D, they fully modeled out all of these places, and man does it look better. Hyrule Castle feels so much more colorful and full of life, which makes the future destroyed Castle Towns that much more bleak and depressing. Now, with bringing the game to a dual screen handheld, that of course invites a lot of opportunities for more changes for the best.
And they kind of f it up somehow.
So when in the overworld, the bottom screen shows a map. Not the in-game map, no, the Art of the World map. And there's a rectangle around the area you're in. What the hell? The blue mini-map is still in the left corner of the top screen. Why? This could have been such an easy improvement, but they f***ed it up. Why? Well, some of the other changes are better. All the HUD elements are on the bottom screen, which frees up a ton of space, which is nice. You can see your hearts, magic meter, rupees, and items all down here, which is very nice. And you'd think with a touchscreen, item management would be a dream. It's not. So you can adjust their order to your liking, which is nice, but you can't do that with the stylus. You have to double tap it or select it with a button. Why? Doing this with a stylus or your fingers feels clunky. But overall, this menu is a lot easier to pull up. The items, map, and gear menus all have separate buttons, which makes it much faster to swap your items, change your tunic, check the map, or whatever else you need. The X and Y buttons can have items mapped to them, but the Nintendo 64 had 3 C buttons that items could be mapped to, so you're losing one?
By me asking that, you know the answer.
There's a slot in each corner. The right 2 can have items mapped to them. The top left changes the view, and the bottom left is the ocarina, which is nice to have it permanently mapped there since it's such a useful item. And when playing the ocarina, you can pull up a screen where you can check how to play the songs you've learned, which is so damn useful. The top 2 squares can have items mapped to them, as I said, and these are great for the fairy powers and also the boots. One of Ocarina of Time 3D's biggest improvements was making the boots mappable to these item slots. You see, in the Nintendo 64 original, if you wanted to wear the iron boots, you'd have to go to the menu, equip the boots, then leave the menu each time you wanted to take them on or off. I never really minded this, but a lot of people hated this, and overall, the boots just deserve to be an item, and they work perfectly to just have in these slots. You can just easily reach over and tap them to equip them. Those were the big changes, but here are a bunch of other smaller ones. Gyro aim, this is a great one. It makes bow play so much smoother and satisfying. It's so damn clunky in the N64 version, so it's nice how good it feels here. There are these Sheikah stones that can show you how to complete certain objectives in the overworld, which is a really nice option for those who get stuck. You can replay any boss fight by going to sleep in Link's bed, and you can also do a boss rush. The water temple now has icons to show how high the water level will be raised when you can play Zelda's Lullaby. In the original, you could get an item called the Stone of Agony that would make the controller rumble if you had Rumble Pack inserted when near secrets. That's been replaced with the Shard of Agony that blinks and beeps when you're nearby secrets. The file select screen no longer shows your death count. The Deku Sticks used to be incredibly powerful, but it's no longer.
They won't let you have any fun around here.
And also, blood. In the bottom of the well mini dungeon, there used to be blood on the floor. Not anymore.
Boring!
And when Ganondorf coughs up blood, it's green.
What?
And speaking of Ganon, probably my least favorite change occurs in the final battle. In the Nintendo 64 version, Ganon is a dark silhouette against the sky. His eyes pierce through the darkness, and he is so intimidating, which feels so perfect for this battle, since this is the battle that decides the fate of Hyrule. Here, Ganon is much more visible.
And we all respect that, but come on. What the f?
Yeah man, I don't know, it's just kind of lame. But that's pretty much it for the base game, but as I said, the Master Quest version is included and that has its own special change. For the most part, it's the Master Quest with the same graphical and quality of life enhancements. But to spice it up, the whole game is mirrored, which is awesome. This was such a great way to mix up the game and makes the Master Quest feel like more than just Ocarina of Time with remixed dungeons. And hell, just having this included here is so damn nice.
And that's Ocarina of Time 3D. It's pretty good.
This is a great remaster of Ocarina of Time. The graphical enhancement is excellent. Sure, overbiting Ganon is a little lame, but the rest of the game looks so much better. All the little quality of life enhancements makes it a smoother, more enjoyable experience these days, but my main issue with this is that it's on the 3DS. While I do think this is better than the N64 original, I still prefer that version because I can play it on Switch on a big old TV. Its flaws I'm willing to put up with to play in a more comfortable manner, and because of that, while this is a better version of Ocarina of Time, I still find it to be bogged down by the fact it's stuck on 3DS.
So yeah, I quite like this version, and if they were to bring to Switch an enhanced Ocarina of Time HD port, I'd be fine with that. But that would also mean they'd probably bring over Majora's Mask 3D, and that's not f***ing happening.
After Ocarina of Time received an enhanced remaster, it seemed only natural that Majora's Mask would follow. Makes sense, most divorces come after weddings. This led to Operation Moonfall, a fan-led campaign to get Nintendo to give Majora's Mask the same treatment. Nintendo's response?
Yeah, we'll consider it. And by that I mean f***ing it up.
Now in reality, they started work on Majora's Mask 3D not long after Ocarina of Time 3D released. They just kept it hidden because that's the Nintendo way. Don't worry guys, it's coming. During the game's development, series director Eiji Aonuma replayed the original and took notes of the things that stuck out to him and wanted changed, things he believed could have been alienating to players, which led to this being one of the most polarizing remasters of all time.
Majora's Mask 3D made a ton of changes to the original, which inherently isn't a bad thing, but there's always the issue of there being oversaturation with the changes, to which it makes this version inferior to the original. But hopefully that doesn't happen here.
It happens. This here was the game I specifically wanted a 2DS for. I sold a few games on eBay and turned it around and bought a 2DS and this bad boy. And I loved it. Majora's Mask 3D was an absolute blast, and I achieved 100% a month or so later. But then, something horrifying happened.
Wow, that was so good. I should play the Nintendo 64 versions.
So let's start off positively. This box art. I adore this cover so much. There's something undeniably elegant about the original, but man, this is an incredible alternate cover. A big part of Majora's Mask is all of the wacky characters you get to know, and so having them represented on the box is incredible, and overall, this is just an excellent piece of art. I mean, this was straight up my phone wallpaper for a while there. Well, let's dive on into the game and into the changes. Most changes from Ocarina of Time 3D remains. The enhanced graphics and character models. Link has of course been vastly improved, while the rest of the characters still do look better than they did in the original. The touchscreen layout is almost the same, but improved in ways, the biggest being the map. Finally, the map on the bottom screen is just the in-game map, which is a godsend. The layout with the items and the ocarina and whatnot is the same. The gear menu button has been moved and now the mask menu is in its place, which is also convenient. I mean, I think the mask menu would have worked anywhere, but you will be using this menu more than the gear menu, so it's a good placement.
Ready for me to get whiny?
So one of Majora's Mask's big gimmicks is the use of masks, especially the transformation masks. The Deku, Goron, and Zora mask allow you to transform into each of those races and use their abilities to solve puzzles and whatnot. However, each of these masks have been gimped in some way. The Deku mask's most useful ability is the ability to hop on water. This is integral for navigating through Woodfall Swamp, and one of the coolest things you could do when water hopping was spin right before you hit the water to hop extra fast. It made traversal easier and more fun, and just felt good since your momentum would carry into your jumps. But here, your momentum immediately stops once you hit the water, making it so much more difficult to reach each lily pad. And on top of that, there's now build up to running as a Deku, so you have to start from farther back. This just makes Deku Link feel so slow and clunky, a slog to use, which sucks because he's so damn fun to use in the Nintendo 64 version. Grunt Link pretty much remains the same, with the only change being that you just need to press A to go into ball form. Holding A still works, so I don't mind this change. I still just hold A because it's damn muscle memory at this point. As for the Zora mask, swimming fast now requires the use of magic.
Why?
This is one of the stupidest f***ing changes. The whole point of the Zora mask is allowing you to swim quickly throughout the Great Bay. Normally swimming is slow and boring, and the Zora mask refused to be that. It's an absolute blast just ripping through the bay, swimming fast, and you can't do that here. And hell, swimming quickly is required at some points. Some platforms you have to dolphin dive onto, or there are some walls where you have to bash into. You can't do that without magic. But wait, you can still do a swimming dash move with no magic. Just press R and you can still break through walls and dolphin dive.
Then why do you need magic to swim faster?
Remember how I said AG Onuma replayed Majora's Mask and took notes of things he thought would be alienating to players? Well, you're not allowed to have fun. Link's forms are still fine here, but man, play the Nintendo 64 version and it's impossible to go back, especially after the boss fights. Majora's Mask had 4 dungeons with bosses that still remain as some of my favorites within the series. There are such different, unique fights from the rest of the series, and they just had to f them up here. Odolwa, in the Nintendo 64 version, there wasn't one single way to defeat him, which led to a fight where you just throw everything you had at him. It's such a fun fight, just using what you can. Here, guess what? Throughout the Zelda series, a very common weak point for enemies has been the eyes, and so each boss has an eyeball weak point added. And Odolwa's is on the back of his head, so you must burrow down into a Deku flower, pop out, drop a seed on his head, and then attack it. It makes this fight stupid easy and just boring. It's just the same thing over and over again. Goat is my all-time favorite Zelda boss. He runs in circles, and as a Goron, you must chase after him, bashing into him at any chance you get. Here, you still chase and bash into him, but now every now and then he'll fall, and guess what? An eyeball pops out. Georg starts the same, but now has a second underwater phase. And guess what?
It sucks.
No, it f***ing sucks.
That was close enough.
He inhales, and there's all these mines, so you have to get him to swallow the mine so they can explode on him and an eyeball can pop out. But by f***, this mechanic is so f***ing finicky. In Twin Mode, this fight originally used the Giant's Mask, a mask that made you huge. It was an easy fight, but a damn fun one. But here, guess what they did? They f***ed it up. So you have to defeat one of the snakes to get the Giant's Mask, and it's pretty fun. You're tiny compared to these giant snakes, so it's a really cool feeling fighting them. Then you get the Giant's Mask, and like the other transformation masks, this one is ruined too. Now you transform into Giant Link with no sword or no nothing, and you're slow as f***.
The transformation mask makes me slower now. I get it.
During the second phase of this fight, you must knock the other snake to the ground and perform this move on him about 4 times. There are these boulders that you can throw at him that will send him to the ground. Only 2. So after you use them, you have to punch him until he falls to the ground. It takes 10 punches to do so, which doesn't sound that bad. But guess what? There is this glitch. When he burrows back underground, that counter resets, meaning you must get in 10 punches before he burrows back underground, which is so f***ing difficult. Guess why? A, because you're slow. B, because when he hits you, you fall back and you have to get up. C, he moves faster than you. D, these boss fights were not play tested. Or E, all the above. Take a wild f***ing guess.
I just don't get how they with the boss fights this bad. Majora's Mask boss fights were already perfect. They were unique from the rest of the series and a ton of fun. I don't get how they made these changes to the boss fights and thought this is better. And the fact that playtesters played this and were like, oh hell yeah, this is good.
Those are the biggest changes, but there are still a couple of smaller lame changes. Each dungeon had 15 stray fairies that when collected could be brought to that region's great fairy who would reward you. Some of the fairy placements have been altered. Why? Saving is now done at owl statues, which was present in the original, but it's different here. In the original, the saves at the owl statues were quick saves, meaning you can only load it once. To save, you had to reset the 3-day cycle. Now you can just permanently save at any time, which is convenient, I won't deny. But you can no longer save when you reset time, which is stupid. I think that was pretty genius. Each cycle would last from 1 to 3 hours, which works perfectly as an average play session. Then once you're done, resetting time and logging everything you've done in that cycle is satisfying. Then start a new cycle the next time you play. It works great, and while I think it's a great quality of life improvement to be able to save whenever, I still think it's dumb you can no longer save when you reset time. And speaking of time, it moves faster than the 3DS version. Yeah, the game wasn't hard enough. Shiro was a soldier who could be found with the Lens of Truth in Akane Canyon, and giving him a red potion would net you the Stone Mask, a mask that makes you invisible to everyone but you. Now, Shiro's been moved to the Pirate's Fortress, a more convenient place for him, yes, but you need magic to see him, which you probably used up to reach the fort in the first place. And Captain Kida, he's a giant skeleton that you must chase and defeat to obtain a required mask. He walks through this loop and you have to catch him before he finishes it, and fireballs will occasionally pop up and you have to defeat some stall children to move on. It's a challenging but fair encounter that feels good to complete. And in the 3DS version, Captain Kida just hobbles. He's so damn slow and just too damn easy to the point where it's just not even fun.
Why does this game make everything slower?
Now there are a handful of good changes. There's a new side quest that gives you a 7 bottle, which is useful enough. The Song of Double Time now lets you pick a specific hour to advance to. You can use the X button.
Yeah, the improvements are sparse, while the downgrades are plentiful. Why do you think I don't like this version?
Majora's Mask is not by any means a perfect game, but this remaster failed to improve it. So here are a couple things that could have been done to help improve the game further. Let the mask be mapped to the D-pad. It's not used for anything besides Navi. It would have been perfect to have the mask there, at least the transformation masks. The climb to Stone Tower Temple requires the constant playing of the Elegy of Emptiness to create statues to hold switches down, kinda like having to constantly switch to the Iron Boots in the Water Temple. They could have just had you press a button to make a clone, or just immediately have one pop up once you finish playing the song. This is just such a baffling remake. The development team stated that they found the original too difficult, so they wanted to make changes to make it more accessible, but in my opinion, they changed the wrong things and in turn made some things more difficult. With Ocarina of Time 3D, the developers wanted to stay as faithful as possible to the original to the point where they kept in some bugs, whereas here they changed something as small as stray fairy placements and as huge as boss fights. Ocarina of Time 3D wanted its original players to re-experience Ocarina of Time the way they remembered, whereas Majora's Mask 3D is unrecognizable in ways. As I said, this was how I first played Majora's Mask, and I loved it because the core of Majora's Mask is still there. The characters, the world of Termina, the story, it's all still as perfect as ever. The dungeons are still excellent and the bosses were fine, albeit a little annoying, but I still really liked this version until I played the Nintendo 64 version. It looked and ran worse, yes, but it was also more fun. Ocarina of Time 3D, you play it and you can undoubtedly say it's an improvement over the original, but Majora's Mask, it's just worse. And it makes the fact that it's trapped on the 3DS so much better.
Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D are such fascinating remasters to me. On surface level, they seem like the definitive versions of these games, but diving in, they really start to lose a lot of their luster. I mean, Ocarina of Time 3D, I get why someone would prefer this to the Nintendo 64 version, but Majora's Mask 3D? Just say you're clinically insane! And as to say with Ocarina of Time, I'd rather just endure the Nintendo 64 crappiness just so I can play them on a Switch on a big screen TV instead of cramped on a little DS, which really just leave these remasters as forgotten versions of the— oh shit, they play in 3D, that's right. Okay, now I see how these are better.